to the Michigan in Focus podcast powered by the Center Square. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor of the Center Square Newswire Service. Michigan in Focus is a production of America's Talking Network, and you can find all of the Center Square's great podcasts at americastalking.com. We ask you to subscribe to Michigan in Focus wherever you listen to your podcast. We're recording today on Thursday, February 9th, 2022, and I'm talking to two of my favorite Valentines, man about town, Tom Gantert, and Michigan correspondent, Scott McClallen. How you doing today, gentlemen?
Doing good.
Great. So I know that you, Scott, have a honey bunny. How about you, Tom? Or have you sworn off the fair herd sex?
No. I kind of just play it by ear, as you might say.
Okay. Well, I know when I was a single man for quite some time, I actually had a dating moratorium that I adhered to from Thanksgiving until Valentine's Day. And did
you adhere to it, or did the women adhere to it?
I adhered to it. It was no, because
I don't think it was self-imposed as you think it was, Bruce.
Well, I think you know absolutely nothing about my dating life, Tom. Anyway, I may be not the greatest catch, but I was a catch nonetheless. So I'll leave it at that. Let's move along, and we'll stop busting each other's chops over this. And Michigan news. Yesterday, Governor Gretchen Whitmer released a proposed budget, like a 300-page behemoth, on what she wants to spend money on. And we have currently more than $9 billion of surplus in the kitty. And she has proposed spending all but $250 million of it. And there's a long grocery list. Now, this is by no means final, but there's a long list of items on her budget wish list. And let's jump into it and see what she wants to give more money to, what she wants to spend additional money on, as well as where she might be making cuts on budgets already. So I will throw it to you, Scott, because you've been writing on this.
Yeah, so Whitmer proposed a $79 billion budget for fiscal year 2024, which is the largest proposed budget in state history. It's about $2 to $3 billion more than her last proposed budget. And the budget is, it would be $14.8 billion in general fund money and a school aid fund of about $19 billion.
What does that work out to per student? Do you know?
Just over $9,000, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's $9,608 per pupil.
Okay, so that's a 5% increase, and we'll bookmark that for a conversation that Tom and I will have a little bit later. So what else is she increasing funding for?
Just education overall.
Okay.
She wants to put a $900 million deposit into the school's rainy day fund. She wants to spend about $160 million to provide free breakfast and lunch to all public school students. And she wants to start with an initial $257 million of spending for free preschool. However, that will not cover the entire cost.
Okay, so that's education, but she also is waving the monetary flag for electric vehicles. And you posted a story on that earlier today on Thursday, January 9th. And how much money are we talking about here?
She's proposing spending $318 million to subsidize electric vehicles and their chargers. So that's broken down. That would be $65 million for charging stations, $48 million over 2 years for a sales and use tax exemption, and $150 million to help school districts buy 500 electric school buses, $45 million to incentivize local governments and businesses to transition their fleets, and $10 million to transition the state's own fleets to electric vehicles.
And who doesn't love a yellow school bus? So, okay, well, all very interesting. Tom, do you have anything to comment on this thus far?
Yeah, I'd like to take the macro look, and so I'm going to throw some numbers at you from the Senate
Was that a
fiscal
comment
agency.
about my Catholicism?
No.
Okay, all right. I'm a
So,
macro snapper.
2018-19, the total state budget, including all funds, federal funds, $58.3 billion. Okay. 4 years later, it's 75.7. So in 4 years, the state budget's gone up $17.4 billion, which is, what's that, about 35% increase, in 4 years. So I've been covering government since 1999. I have a belief that all government money is one way fungible, meaning that it can be moved around very easily. And I say that when I was at the Ann Arbor News Reporter, I saw them take capital funds that were supposed to go to sewer projects and find a way to use it for public art. Okay. So you can do anything you want. So the big picture to me is that government, state of Michigan government, is spending $17.4 billion more dollars than it was just 4 years ago. A lot of that is increase in federal money. So like in 2018-19, that was before the pandemic, So the state budget that year, 2018, was $23.5 billion from the feds. Okay. It got up to $40.8 billion last year. So that alone is almost, 17 billion more, but it's almost double. And then this year it dropped to 31.1, which is still an $8 billion increase from 4 years ago. So the feds just threw money at state governments. And that's one of the reasons why we're up $17.4 billion. So however she wants to do it, I heard you mention cuts. There's no cuts going on compared to what was going on 4 years ago. It's just a big wad of money that they have right now.
Well, that's a good transition because just to prove you wrong, Tom, because I love doing that. And I know you're so humble that you will take this in the spirit that it's intended and not be remarkably offended. There's actually a 5% cut in the amount of money per pupil that will be allocated to online public charter schools. And I'm working on a story on that as we speak. And I'm getting I have received a lot of feedback from the charter public school community about how they are more or less outraged by this.
Well, let me address that. That's not an overall cut. They're taking some away from one division of K-12 funding and giving it to another division of K-12 funding. So overall, K-12 funding has gone up. You can go look at the Senate Fiscal Agency data on that. State funding has gone up every year in K-12 funding. How they divvy that up, yes, there are some places that are going to get cut. Now, I also have an interesting thing to talk to you about the charter schools, because we've seen this before in terms of cuts. And I want to, something that Buddy Morehouse provided me from the Michigan Association of Public School
Academies.
Charters.
Right.
Yeah. So what they're doing is they're cutting online charter schools. Okay. Now I'm going to read you some data that he got me. The percentage of economically disadvantaged students on these online charter schools is 72% compared to 52% a statewide average. So when I say economically disadvantaged, I mean, these are students that are
very low
getting
income,
free or reduced lunch.
Right.
Basically low income. The percentage of special education students that are online is 13% in cyber charter schools. That's right. 13.48% is the average statewide. So it's about on par. The percentage of African Americans that are in cyber charter schools is 26%. Statewide, that's 18%. And the percentage of white students that are in cyber charter schools is 54%. Statewide, it's 64%. So they're hurting the very people that the people that support Whitmer are saying need the most money. That if you talk about equity funding, which is a huge term in education now, and that what they're saying is that the people that I just described to you, the economically disadvantaged, the special education students, the African Americans, are the ones, because of the learning gap, need more money. And yet, what is she doing to these very group of students? She's taking money away from them. And why is that? Because charter schools do not have unions. That's why. And so when you start looking into, what really is motivating this attack on charter schools, it can't be what they say they want to protect and fund more of, because they're actually doing the exact opposite. And this is the second time this has happened, because the Michigan Civil Rights Commission tried to do this too and take money away from charter schools. Buddy Morehouse and MAPSA made a good thing. It's like, who also are the people that, according to them, want to be online the most? Disabled. Is the people who are bullied, which is sometimes the LGBTQ crowd.
Correct.
And those are the people that they're hurting. And does that make sense? There's only one explanation for it, is because charter schools don't unionize. And if you're not unionized, you're the enemy. Therefore, we're going to do everything to defund you, no matter who gets harmed. And who gets harmed here?
Right.
Students.
And it was pointed out to me by a teacher from a charter school today that one of the issues that the governor used to rationalize cutting the funds for online charter schools was that there are no bricks and mortar, so that there's not that overhead but that's not true. There are actually regional centers where the students can go in and avail themselves of computers to do special lab work. So that's not necessarily. And because I'm one of those guys, I'm one of those doubting Thomases. I asked to show me a picture, show me the brick and mortar that you have, show me the computers that you have, show me students in there actually using it. And it took her 3 minutes to send me a photo. So there's that. And then there's also just the fact that there are physically disabled students that it's incredibly difficult for them to motivate themselves to get on the bus or get in the car and drive to school, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just becomes a major convenience for them to be able to do online learning from home. And what say you, Scott?
Yeah, I did not go to a charter school or even school in Michigan. So I do not have a lot to contribute to this topic.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. Well, what you can contribute to, though, is a bit more on the budget priorities for the state of Michigan. And you published a story yesterday about Michigan Senate Republicans list their budget priorities. And how are those different from what the governor is proposing? And I'm imagining that they're pretty gosh darn significant.
I think there's some
overlap.
Some overlap, I would say. Except Senate Republicans said that they want permanent tax relief for every Michigander, while the Democrats want a one-time $180 check. So that's a significant difference. I think Senate Republicans wanted more money in infrastructure. Governor Whitmer's first term, she really prioritized road spending, and that's not really something that you see being prioritized in this budget.
Okay, well, and so essentially, what we're saying is the governor and the Democrat legislators' proposal for a $180 per taxpayer refund check is not as preferable as, say, a permanent tax cut that would already be triggered by a 2015 law here in Michigan.
Well, we'll see if that money is still around to trigger the income tax cut. I think we'll have to wait and see about that, at least until after today, or until at least this bill is passed.
Okay. Mr. Gantert, any thoughts on this? Enlighten us.
I would just like to point out this. I'm going to read you from the Senate Fiscal Agency. This is school aid funding history, K-12. They made state restricted dollars, which is the gist of the public state dollars, $14.5 billion in 2021-22. 2022-23, $16.9 billion. So it went up $2.4 billion this year over last year. So K-12 schools funding was not cut.
No, I never said it was. What I said what was cut.
I never said you did.
Okay, all right. What I said was cut was the online charter school funding, which indeed very much was, because I've read through the line item, and you have to get to page 37, line 35 of the governor's proposed budget, which is about 200 pages long. So fortunately, it was in the first quarter. So I was able to read that. So, okay. Other cuts, other expansions that we should be looking for that you think will become rather contentious because it's doubtful that you're going to see a whole lot of contention between the majorities that the Democrats enjoy in the Senate and the House of Representatives with the governor. And we have a Republican Party in both houses that have been somewhat defanged. It's not as if they have a whole lot of power that they can use against the governor and the majorities in both houses.
They can't stop her, can they?
I don't think so. I don't think so
either.
Yeah.
So
they can stop
really
immediate action. So they don't necessarily have 2/3 majority in the House and Senate. So, I mean, they can make it inconvenient, but for a lot of things, they can't stop it.
Thank God she doesn't have a 45-cent gas tax on the table anymore.
Well, yeah. And that was a whole nother story. And I was surprised that during the campaign last fall that wasn't brought up more often, that she had said in her debate for her first term that when accused by Bill Schuette, who was the Attorney General at the time, that she was going to raise the gas tax to like 25 cents a gallon, and she scoffed at it. Ha ha ha! That's not going to happen. Where did you get that? And then a month after she was elected, she floated like, what was it, 45 cents per gallon, and heads exploded. But then by the time she was running for re-election against Tudor Dixon last fall, that was barely mentioned. And we're still dealing with a lot of roads that haven't been fixed.
I would like to point out that overall, the budget never went down under Rick Snyder either. So it wasn't like the GOP was much of a roadblock when they had, or a speed bump for spending when they had control. We're still spending more every year.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's going to be de rigueur in any government when you consider inflation, when you consider just the fact that tax revenues are generally always going to go up. One of the places where tax revenues may not go up would be collected revenues from the gas tax if we continue on the path of adoption of electric vehicles.
I don't see that happening. I mean, what is it? 5% now of the vehicles on the road are electric vehicles. It's still, until electric vehicles, you got two huge problems with electric vehicles. One is the cost. It's, like I always say, I drive a Honda Civic Sport. If I wanted to get an electric vehicle, the cheapest one would be twice as much. Okay. And the other thing is there's nowhere around where I live to charge an electric vehicle.
That was a subliminal message to all the ladies out there. What Tom drives. So when you see a Honda Civic Sport out there, that could be Tom Gantert, America's most desirable bachelor.
A GM, what was it? A GM Sprint. It got 45 miles to the gallon, was a stick shift. And, that was 1986, Bruce. There is no car out there that gets 45 miles to the gallon like that car did. So gas mileage got worse. back, if you wanted, it was like riding a roller skate. It was this very small car.
Well, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is the NHTSA had required that there be all the safety apparatus put on vehicles that are, well, frankly, just heavier. So you have heavier vehicles that are using much more gas.
By the way, the shift blew out on that after like 24,000 miles, and GM wouldn't fix it. 24,000 miles and the shift went out.
Do you want me to teach you how to drive a stick shift, Tom?
I know how to drive a stick shift.
Okay. All right.
I know how to read a budget too.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time that we have for today. Tom Gantert, thank you so much for being here. Tom is the managing editor for one of the managing editors.
A managing editor.
I said one of the managing editors.
Oh,
okay.
I thought you said that.
All right.
I don't want to get in trouble.
Oh, he listens just as well as all the other managing editors, apparently, of the Center Square. And Scott McClallen is the Center Square's Michigan correspondent. The Michigan in Focus is powered by the Center Square, a production of America's Talking Network. You can find all of the Center Square's great podcast at americastalking.com. That's americastalking.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, we ask you to subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor of the Center Square Newswire Service. Listen for another episode of Michigan in Focus next week.